Here at Physio Matters, we think physio matters. Become a member today and access the biggest MSK library on the planet. Access at home, work, or in the gym to make sure your CPD conditioning is elite. physio-matters.com. More content than will fit on a deadlift bar.
John Cowman, welcome to Chewing It Over, the CSP's Chief Executive Officer. Who'd want that job?
Thanks, Jack, and thanks for the invite. I'm really pleased to speak to you and your listeners today. Yeah, big job, daunting job, something that has filled me with as much nervousness as it has excitement, as you can imagine. Responsible for an organization with huge history, huge progress, and real impact within the system, both here in the UK and beyond. I've said it before, and I maintain it. It's the greatest privilege of my career to be sitting in this chair. And what brought me here, the deep passion that I've always had for this profession. As you know, I'm a physiotherapist by background, but also the fact that over the last 25 years, I've developed my executive leadership in a really eclectic way, I think. And one of the things I love about physiotherapy, the profession and the society indeed, is that it's as broad as it is long. And I think it needs somebody that has a really broad view of leadership and a really broad view of influencing within the systems that we exist. And it was for that reason that I felt that I was a good fit for the job, and clearly other people did too. You included, Jack. You're not getting away with that one.
So yeah, I know. Who's responsible? Yeah, we could say that. Yeah, I was very involved and was very impressed with your candidacy. We said at the time as a recruiting panel that we weren't wedded to the incoming CEO being a physio, and that Karen was an interesting novel precedent in a sense that rather than being the precedent that needed to be adhered to, in that she happened to be a physio. Yeah. You also have that background though, so you ended up with what was a nice to have, desirable criteria, ended up being something that you also fulfill. So how has this come about in terms of the timing then? So you're a physio by background, but not necessarily retained your registration to under the HCPC, for example. But just talk me through, if you can, as to your background further, as well as then whether the timing was right for you for this now.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, background in physiotherapy, trained in Dublin, and then went immediately into an academic route, actually. And that was largely because there was real interest in my undergraduate research and they wanted me to extend it. And I really actively involved myself in that academic pursuit and came to the UK and continued to work in research. But the background is more than the what jobs did you do as a physiotherapist. I think you can get lost in that, and this just ends up being my CV, which I doubt very much if your listeners are interested in, and if they are, it's out there in lots of different formats. There's something about physiotherapy for me. I was supposed to be a graphic designer, Jack, as you know, and then went ice skating. And as you can probably tell by my size, I'm not somebody who's good at a triple toe loop, but dislocated my knee, went into went into treatment, surgeries that failed, 4 or 5 years of having intensive rehabilitation to try and get me back to rugby, which unfortunately never happened. But I fell in love with the profession and its breadth and the opportunities for development in lots of different areas, whether that was clinical, whether it was leadership, whether it was academic research, etc. And that was really what brought me into the career. And therefore, I think it's my pursuits have been exploiting those bits of the opportunities within physiotherapy that align to my skill sets, my interests, and where I can have most impact. And whilst I would say I was as passionate a clinician as any of your listeners, there was something that was innate with me in terms of influencing and leadership. And it was at that point that I decided to move my career into that executive leadership. And it was at that point that I decided not to continue with my registration as a physiotherapist, because to a degree, it was being seen as kind of parochial in executive environments where we were working on system leadership. And also I'll be honest, it was somewhat distracting. And I was very clear what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. In terms of timing, you will know that I spent a significant amount of my career in the NHS and working with the Department of Health, as it was then, Health and Social Care as it is now. But and I feel like I had real impact, especially around community services, which we might pick up. And then left the NHS in the change of administration from Labour to Conservative because I was made redundant, no other reason. But I took the opportunity to go to the third sector and I studied social enterprise at Oxford, and that really gave me an appetite for it. And what I saw in the third sector were some brilliant practices and some really good ways of influencing the system. And I hope I bring that here. Why was the timing right for me? I think I've been courted for CEO jobs for many years. And I always said that I would never accept a CEO job, or I would never pursue a CEO job unless it was something that aligned really deeply to my passions, my moral base, and my ambition as a person. And when the CSP came up, it was a job that you couldn't refuse, really, because it did all of those things. That this role really aligns to my moral base, to my values, to my passion for the profession, and to my abilities to be able to lead. So yes, timing was good, but thankfully, right place, right time.
Yeah, certainly. It was really interesting for us to go through that process, relatively rigorous process of recruiting what we know is an important phase for the organization and for the profession. Of course, that's because it is also for society, the current state of flux as we are all in. How have you? It's been nice in some ways that when recording this now 6 months into your tenure, I think we could easily have jumped on and done a real just introduction piece in January as Karen left and she was on the show in December. So I'm glad it's been 6 months because now I feel that this question is less, you can answer it less superficially in a sense as to how have you found it? What have you found within the organization, and how do you consider the state of the profession?
So I think the first thing, and you mentioned Karen, and I would want to highlight the work that she's done. I think Karen, she had decided to move on to the next stage of her life and career. But my God, has she left the CSP in a really good state. So she has, when you come into a CEO role, you're always nervous about what you haven't been told. And Karen did a 3-month handover with me. So I was really well prepared. And I knew she was directing me and advising me where to look, if you like. But she has left an organization behind her that is sound in governance terms. It is sound financially. It is sound in its influencing and how it approaches influencing. And it is certainly sound in its culture and ambition. But Karen was really clear to me that there was still work to be done, as there always is. Some of your listeners may know that I'm undertaking my PhD, and it's in organizational design with an absolute focus on teal philosophy, which is how you lead an organization through the joint efforts of people rather than in a hierarchical top-down management way, if you like. And I am really I'm absolutely wedded to the strategy. As you know, we've another 2 years left of this strategy. We'll do a full review next year, 2.5 years, and we'll do a full year review next year. But I'm absolutely wedded, and I think the evidence and the way that was structured is also very sound. I guess when I came in, I described the organization as one that had cultural radiators. It was warm, it was welcoming, it wasn't resistant to a difference of opinion or a change of direction. But actually, there were no burning platforms. I've looked and there's no skeletons in the cupboards, so that's always a good one. I'm still looking though, I'll still keep an eye on those cupboards, but so far it's been really good. But I agree with you, it's great to be able to be here 6 months in. And I'm really happy to describe that. I think the work that we need to do, but I would premise it with this. This is a membership organization, and it is for our members. And that is first and foremost. So my focus is less about how the CSP is and more about how the CSP is for its members, how it's perceived by its members, the impact it's having for its members, the alignment of our work to the needs of our members, which are ever changing, and being able to make sure that the CSP is led by its members through the council. That is the way that I would describe that. So the 7 key pieces of work that I think are, it's not that I think, that are essential moving forward, it's certainly in the medium term, is firstly how we manage the relationship between the council as the representatives of the membership and the leadership team at the CSP. And Jack, you will know that we've already started some really good work in that space. I feel that it's not that the relationship is broken. It wasn't that I was seeing any major problems with it, but ultimately in leadership of an organization, it's non-executive council and its executive leadership team need to be really, really working collaboratively, constructively, and together. And that's the work we're doing. Secondly,
maybe we pause there, John, just because I know what I'm like. I'll lose touch with the 7. So on that, I've long said, and it's been 2 years-ish, I've been in the belly of the beast now. Internally, but often, we're still working with the CSP and a member for many years before that. I've said that by governance, by structure, and by aim, of course, #member-led. I've heard it for many, many years now. However, it's something that can be there by structure, but in practice can sometimes be a little superficial, and I still consider that to be a worrying case. One of the things that really kind of comes through that is that something that you feel is just physiotherapy and the CSP's version of a wider problem to try and generate engagement? Or is it that is something that we do need to work on and is something that we're lagging behind?
Okay, so one of the philosophies within Teal, and it's a very important one, is constant customer focus. Now, customer means different things to different organizations. So it can mean, true customers in retail sense. It can mean customers in terms of patients within the NHS. Our customer, the people who buy our product are our members. You are our customer. And Teal is very clear that constant customer focus is key to the success of an organization. So it is never ending. That customer focus is something that has to perpetuate through everything that we do at the CSP. So where do I see our customer focus being strong? I think through our professional networks, really strong. The volunteerism that goes through those networks is the best I've ever seen in any organization, and they are passionate about what we need to do, but reasonably and understandably, they are focused on a particular specialism or a particular part of physiotherapy. The second thing is through our committees, our networks, and our councils. So what I see there are people who are putting themselves forward with that passion and with that commitment in their own time, giving to us their expertise, their experiences, and their viewpoints. So I think we have lots of strength in that. However, that covers a very, very small percentage, possibly in decimals, of our membership of 65,000 people. And the question is then, how do you truly engage and truly focus on all 65,000 members? And I think my role as CEO is to make sure that I'm not complacent about, as long as I'm seeing the committees and the networks and the council, the engagement job is done. And what your members will tell you is that I'm out visiting physiotherapists in their workplace where they are. I'm going to where they are rather than expecting them to come to where I am. And I think that's absolutely essential, because otherwise, I totally agree with you. Saying the words that we are member-led will not be meaningful until members can see that their opinions, their leadership, and their assertions are present in our work plans.
I think it's where, as well, people recognize that if they were to donate a unit of time to the organization, be that through volunteerism or even just as a means of engaging through as a lay member, right? They've clicked a few things, they've then shared some feedback through whatever channel is appropriate. I think most professional people are recognizing that doesn't need to necessarily be agreed with. It's going to be one of many voices.
Yes.
But it just needs to be accounted for. It just needs to, they want to feel like it's landed, it's been heard, it's been even challenged as quickly as is possible. But it's something that actually then there is something there to at least have a back and forth with. And I think the more channels we can get there, the better. I'm not suggesting for a second that's easy, but I'm delighted to hear that is certainly on your radar. And of course, I asked the question knowing full well it is, having worked together now for a little while, but I'm glad we've been able to unpack that. Now, I did cut short your 7, so go for it on number 2 if you like.
No, that's fine. I think, and these are some internal, some external, okay? And they don't come in any order of priority. I want to be really clear on that. In order for that relationship with the council and the leadership team to be good, and indeed with our members, we need to be transparent. And what do I mean by transparent? We need to show people the work we're doing, the impact we're having, and the progress we're making. And we need to do that in a consistent way that is accessible to people. And so one of the key roles that I've played in charities over the last 16 years is developing intelligence within the organization that can be shared with our key stakeholders. And so there's an absolute focus on creating information dashboards in a real-time way, so that when people do want and ask about what we're doing, we're able to provide them. So that kind of live dashboard, live intelligence is really important. And that's linked to number 3, which is our digital transformation. Are we at the level we would want to be in being a modern organization using technology to its optimal level? No, we are not. Are there others out there who are ahead of us? Yes, there are. And is that lack of technology is digital transformation a nice to have or an essential? It's an essential. And let me give you a really good example of that. We know the challenges we're having with international recruitment at the moment and people coming into this country, thankfully and willingly. And us not being able to reach out to them beforehand, because although Council and LT have agreed the international affiliate category, and this is only one example, Jack, our systems don't allow us to do that. And so what you have is you have a strategy within the CSP that we all recognize its import and how impactful it could be. And actually, we're not able to do that. So there are some real things. This is not digital transformation so that we can create nice media or create nice resources. It is because we cannot pursue all parts of our strategy without transforming how we use technology. The next one, and this is, I don't think it's a controversial issue. When I was at MenCap, when COVID hit and when we had the tragic loss of with Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. Okay, I was in an organization managing 7,500 support workers. Okay, and we went through the same journey as MenCap, or sorry, at MenCap than the CSP had to go through. These are difficult agendas. We are trying to overcome historical societal opinions and indeed historical societal behaviors. And that ain't going to happen overnight. So I have huge regard and would commend really generously the work that the CSP have done in the equity, diversity and belonging space. But it's a turbulent sea, Jack. And so the fourth priority for me is to look at how we're progressing. And I'm really pleased to say that we have now agreed to bring in our key stakeholders around EDB in September this year to take stock of where we are, to take stock of our success, but also to remember that in this turbulent sea that I described are the Gaza and Palestine issues, there's transgender issues, there are other things that are creating waves within that sea. And I need to check that the vessel is sound. I need to check that our passengers on that vessel are sound. And I need to know that the next journey we take is one that's possible. It will be fraught with risk. It will be fraught with contention. But together, I believe that we can chart that course really soundly.
Do you have a sense of how well we can retain any sense of proportion for what the organization should be doing? For example, it doesn't have a foreign office, and it would be bizarre for it to suggest it would have, but in these recent times it would have made sense for us to. And I know that me and you have been involved in a leadership team really stretching itself to try to comprehend complex world events of which are well outside of our ability to do much, but similarly understandable. The emotion we all feel when we see the scenes we do across the world, not just in Gaza, of course.
No, of course.
But it's then the it's not necessarily that crisp. And as a member organization, it's not as if we're going to be able to be so agile with regards to being able to feel the pulse of the entire membership, to know how much we should be weighing in on such issues. And so I, by the way, I asked this question knowing full well I haven't got the answer, but I know that the polls of that are likely a mistake. So to focus so much resource, time, and attention in such a way that feels very distant from physiotherapy, that feels like a very different organization, of which doesn't seem really what we're paid to do. However, to ignore it and say, well, no, we're staying in our lane, we're just physios, is ignorant of the wider psychosocial context of which we all live, of which influences healthcare and therefore influences physiotherapy. So it's within that I asked the question, but I just wondered as to where your head was at as to how we can create a sense of sensible proportion on behalf of the members.
So let me answer that in two ways, and it's timely. I just came back from the European Region General Meeting of World Physiotherapy, where I was last week. Right. Now, we need to be really clear that the CSP is regarded as one of, if not the most important physiotherapy society, certainly in Europe, and I get the sense of the world, but I'll tell you that after I've met with World Physiotherapy properly. So let's be really clear here. We are on the international stage and we are seen in a very positive light, and it would be really wrong of us not to want to play our part there. So firstly, if I answer, that's answering the international question, should we be there? Yes, we should. And yes, we were. And yes, we had profound impact last week on the European region. And I was very proud of the work that was done by us. However, what the other side of this is, and it comes back to us being a membership organization. I am a true believer in equity and diversity. I don't do it because it's something that, you know, the world wants us to do. It's because I have an absolute passion for it. And Jack, as you know, I'm an immigrant. I'm in a same-sex relationship. I've got 2 children. There's lots of things within my own life that brings diversity, but that diversity is so apparent within a membership organization of 65,000 people. I think it's important that we never try to please all of the people all of the time. And that sounds counterintuitive when you want to provide your members with what they need. But there are limitations to where we should be putting our focus and limitations on where we should put our resources. And I think the balance that we've had so far has been good, if not very good. But what I do believe is that there's been times that some of the issues out with our direct influence, or even out with our indirect influence, have taken up a lot of capacity and a lot of time. And when an organization finds themselves in that space, they need to then say, is this really what's important? And what I would want to be doing, and that's why I'm bringing everybody together in September, and that's only because we need to give people notice for these events in September, is because I want to know what our key stakeholders believe we are achieving, and have we got the right focus? And I don't know, Jack. You know, when you work in a teal philosophy, you very quickly commit to the fact that I am one person with one set of opinions. And my job is not to assert those opinions on the organization or the membership. My job is to gather those opinions from all of the members and all of our stakeholders so that we can target our resources and prioritize our work accordingly. So for some members, I'm very aware that they would want us to take a much stronger position on world issues, on peace issues, on political issues, whereas some of our other members will be saying, don't see the relevance of that to me as a physiotherapist. And I'll give you a really good example. You know, we have an LGBTQIA plus network who established because of the ongoing discrimination faced by people who have diversity in their sexuality, gender, etc. And the importance of that, I think we recognize. But I've had 2 messages from members recently saying, can you please stop talking about this? It's not important. It's literally, stop talking about LGBTQIA plus rights. That's not what we are as a membership organization. However, we have 65,000 members, many of whom in the LGBTQIA plus are still feeling a lot of discrimination and a lot of barriers. So it's balancing. Where's the balance? I wouldn't take a view on that right now. But what I would say is I'm really impressed with the honesty of the organization, in the sense that ARC gives us that's one of our platforms to be able to hear that. And the fifth priority for me at the moment, we're coming up to ARC, as you know, it's in June, and I hope to see lots of the members there. You will see me at those events with the bells on. You will see me all the time. I won't be in a meeting room. I'll be out. I want to talk to you. I want to see you. I want to hear what you're feeling about both the process of ARC, but broader than that. But one of the things that I'm working on with the team now is looking at all of the ARC motions and saying, what would that mean if we had to implement all of these motions, so that we can plan our resource, we can plan our capacity, and we can plan our actions, not go into ARC and come out the other side and think, okay, well, we know what we've agreed, but rather go into ARC and say, in agreeing this, what is going to be required for us to bring that home? And that's where I think we need to be really astute, because members will want us not just to give a nod to things. They want things to change. And that's where ARC gives us a good chance to balance those things.
I think a lot would be progressed if we were to manage to get an appropriate comprehension. I think that's one of the big things that seems to be that people are well used to disagreeing, and also understand that amongst 65,000+, we're going to have a massive diversity of view on given issues and things. But it's the challenges to comprehend decisions, or our ability to manage to create clarity in our communication, that I think will move things. And hopefully we can see progress via ARC and other mechanisms. But we need a variety of mechanisms, don't we? It kind of speaks to what we were mentioning before on the engagement piece. It kind of comes together there, where if comprehension can be achieved, then disagreement is going to be much more productive. And
well,
I think
absolutely,
and
you know, you have to come back to Gandhi for that one, I think, because and his assertion that honest disagreement is a great sign of progress. And I think that that's what I want to be able to achieve at the CSP. That's why I said I think we need to be careful not going down the route of trying to please all of the people all of the time. And why? Because of course, if we could, let's do it. Let's please everybody and let's please them every day. However, one of the things that I've found is that when you try to do that from a leadership perspective, you end up doing nothing, because there's very few solutions that are going to satisfy all of the people all of the time. So you almost you paralyze yourself. What I want to get to is exactly what you say, that there are decisions to be made. I don't find any decision as a difficult decision. I find it, all decisions are, in that moment, have you tried to make the best decision? Have you listened hard enough? Have you looked at evidence well enough? Do you really understand what it is that people are asking you? And then to be transparent in the having done all of that, we have made this decision for these reasons. And inevitably, some people will say, well, I don't agree with the balance that you struck in that decision making, whereas others will find it to be the ideal solution. But we cannot continue conversations unless we're transparent. And what I find when decisions are contentious, and we can take the two subjects that I mentioned earlier, subjects I'm not afraid to talk about, subjects that are real for our members, subjects that do demonstrate some polarized views within our membership. Let's talk about those ones. They're the ones that are the best conversations. But if any one of the parties involved in that conversation shut down the conversation with comments like, because that's just the way it is, then the conversation stops. And that's the biggest danger in a membership organization, is that you stifle or you halt conversations with your members. That's when you lose the customer focus. So I agree with you entirely. That transparency of thinking and that willingness to be challenged and to converse on those challenges, regardless of how difficult those conversations might be, is absolutely essential.
One of the obvious maturities of leadership that comes is to understand where there might not be solutions and there are trade-offs. And there are trade-offs in which we can discuss them openly and disagree about them openly, but without misrepresentation. And that's your Gandhi quote nails that, of course.
Yeah.
Sorry, where were we up to? 6?
So we're up to 6.
Nice.
Sorry, 5. 2 others. We are an exceptionally prominent organization within the system, and within the allied health profession world, have the highest membership. We have the highest profile. And one of our biggest profile events is our conference. So I've mentioned ARC, and I've said to you that because that's more on the union side of our work, and that's a very high priority for us, as you know. It was very interesting, Jack, to be sad. I chaired the CEO's meeting for European last week. And of all of the, so there was 11 countries represented at that meeting. Only 3 of us were unions, as well as professional bodies. And the CSP was the only organization that provided its members with the professional support, the professional body side, the union side, and the public liability insurance. No one else in Europe is doing that, which was really surprising to me. And I won't reveal all of the detailed numbers because I said I wouldn't, but I can tell our members categorically that the price we charge is approximately half of a comparative product in any of those other countries. Okay, so I feel we're given a good value proposition. However, one of our highlight events is our conference. And so I am doing work now with the team to make sure that we really enhance our profile with that conference, that we have the best speakers, we have the best venues, we have the highest participation, because it's one of the places, not the only place and not the most important place, but an important place where our members come together, and I want it to be an amazing experience. So we're also working on that so that we can give our members a much longer term view of what we're going to be doing at conference.
Well, if anyone wanted to doubt whether or not you were trying to initiate change, if the event that you've just described happens in the next few years, then that would be pretty radical. As a conference organizer myself, that was almost a reluctant conference organizer 5 years ago because of need for something different. Obviously, a very MSK-centric one, of which I'm not suggesting, therefore. But I'm excited to see how that would take shape, because I think we do need those flagship moments, and it's a really obvious way to bring things together and to unify. You've mentioned there about the other organizations in Europe not having necessarily those arms to each of them. Is that because they've got the sense to not, or is it that they're missing out on something? What is your sort of sense as to the way in which, because there's a risk that the CSP is everything to everyone and is therefore drawn thin, or that it conflicts, or that therefore can feel expensive because it's doing a lot, and so people don't realize exactly what it's there for them on. So okay. Just wondered, there's a lot been said over the years, and it's something that's been talked about on this podcast, including with Karen over many years, about the how complementary it is as a trade union and a professional body. I know it's other things as well, yeah. But just wondered on your take on that as a sort of concept.
Okay, so as a practicing physiotherapist for many years, there were several things that I needed to sleep soundly. That's how I describe it. So I needed to know that I was progressing as a professional, and that I was accessing good evidence base, good resources, and that I belonged within this profession, and that the profession itself was committed and seeking to continually improve. That was one thing that helped me sleep soundly. Secondly, is that as a physiotherapist working in the Irish health system, the Irish education system, English education system, and the English health system, I wanted to know that I had support if that wasn't right. And I'm an absolute proponent of human rights and employment rights. And I wanted to know that if things weren't working, that I would have support. That was the second thing. And the third thing was, I would never lay my hands on a patient without knowing that I had some form of protection in terms of insurance. And I would urge all of our members to remember that, regardless of whether they have NHS liability cover or as a self-practicing physiotherapist and an autonomous practitioner, I wanted to know I had that. So for me, the combination of the offer from the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, and I was a member when I was practicing in Ireland, and I was a member of the Irish Society, and indeed I was a member of the American Association, because that gave me a breadth of information and resources. I think our offer is right. And I would.
That doesn't necessarily mean it has to come from the same place, though. So you've just described what would comfort you and sleep soundly at night. I couldn't agree more, and I can't imagine practicing without those things.
Yes.
Apart from the obvious sort of coordination problem that solves in terms of less admin, much like I get my gas and electric from the same provider for that reason.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily stop me being able to sleep at night by dining a la carte.
Yeah. And so this comes back to the trying to please all of the people all of the time, Jack. So, if we were to please all of the people all of the time, we would probably have upwards of 100 differentiated memberships, because lots of people want lots of different things, and they want to be able to pick and mix those things as they wish. But we also have to remember, what's the potential impact of that? So let's just take PLI as an example. Okay, just one example. If you look at PLI in the Republic of Ireland, it is more than our total membership fee. Okay. Why? Because people are purchasing that individually. They don't have economy of scale. They don't have any influence over the insurance company. Let me tell you what happened our premium this year. So the PLI for the CSP is the single biggest expenditure per year. And because of the nature of the world at the moment in terms of litigation, and indeed because of some very low number but reasonably serious cases from physiotherapy over the last few years, we had budgeted a potential increase of 20% on our PLI. Now, I don't think that's unreasonable with the sector. Our PLI went down this year, okay? Now, by £880 on a bill of over 2 million. So let's not get excited about the discount, okay? However, let's say it flatlined. Why? Because we are negotiating really hard on behalf of all of our members. So I don't think it's just the convenience. I think it's the value that we can extract as one society. And I think that's really important. Let's take the unions as another example. The fact that all of our practicing members are a member of our union means that we have scale when we sit at the TUC. It means we have scale when we sit at the Allied Health Professions Forum, etc. And we have notoriety when we sit with politicians, because that is seen as being a prominent organization that really, really gets it. So I don't think it's just convenience. I think it's much, much more than that. However, Jack, I totally respect the fact that when I worryingly sit with physiotherapists across all 4 countries, and one of the first things who work in the public sector, one of the first things they say to me is, can we not just be a member of the union and the professional body and not purchase PLI because we don't need it? Now, fundamentally for me, my answer is yes, you do need it, and you should have it, because that is an additional protection for you. So I feel our product is right. Will it differentiate at some point? Potentially. We do have differentiations, as you know. We have retirement, we have student, we have associate members, we have non-practicing members. So we do, but I fundamentally, and I have to say, you asked me the question first to say, are those other organizations in Europe wiser for not having that? I can certainly tell you that wasn't how they felt at the meeting last week. They were rather envious of the fact that we were able to offer our members such a broad and such a comprehensive package. For some of them, they couldn't be a union. For others, they haven't got the power for the PLI. And I think we're in the right space.
I certainly can see as well where operationally we know that the consistency of any CSP member asking for professional or union support, knowing that underneath that is a policy of which is consistent, makes for a much cleaner process and a much more efficient process of support as well. My views have definitely evolved on this over the years, but one thing that I do consider to be an ongoing challenge that some just don't really recognize at all, which is absolutely fine. It's just that the nature of quality meets quantity. You know, there being an interesting tension where, and the CSP is not the worst for this, but just the sense that what we need is more. More of, and that would be the only part of that answer. You say, well, might we be able to raise standards as well? Well, you talk too much about standards, you can't help but then imply that standards therefore could be better. It feels a little bit awkward for a union to talk about that sometimes, whereas as a professional body wanting to really hold that standard, especially something that would be a chartered society if it was recognized as the Chartered Society of Accountancy, for example, that has threshold in examination and a way in which you've got to go before in front of a panel of your peers for surveyors and the like. You're kind of in a situation where that tension is something that I think we need to make sure we acknowledge, even if we need to counter it, and then find a way to make sure that then the upsides that you've described really well are so obviously seen as being an advantage that then goes beyond some of the minor, if indeed they are minor, risks to the effect that I've described. Because if those that are really interested in, like, how can we raise our game and be seen as being elite, say in pain and injury or in neuro or as respiratory therapists, it's going to be then the sort of, but don't say that we're not too loudly, or don't say that there are competencies that we could be improved upon too loudly, because essentially on this other, out the other side of our mouth, we are saying we're here, we're actually the exact workforce you need, therefore do nothing but raise our numbers. And it's something that two organizations would find it easier to be critical friends and to complement each other sometimes than maybe two wings of the same organization, is indeed an argument I've both held historically. Admittedly, it's softened, but I do remain sympathetic to that broader view that tension is something that remains, as well as is not always articulated the mitigations as easily as it could be.
I think you're right. And let me give you an example from earlier in my career, recently though, in my career, and that was as the Chief Operating Officer of MENCAP. So we were one of the strongest voices for people with learning disabilities, but we were also one of the biggest providers of support. So what does that mean? It meant that £180 million of our business was commissioned every year by social care. So we were a provider of huge scale to the public sector. But at the same time, we were banging down their door about the rights of people with learning disabilities, and indeed equally the rights of social care workers within the system. Now, that was seen in a very different type of tension, but it's similar in the sense that some would argue, well, you shouldn't be both. You shouldn't be a provider and a lobbyist. You should separate those two organizations. And that was a debate that was ongoing at MENCAP for many, many years. However, when we sat at that lobbying table and when we were looking for change in the system, we came with the experience of 5,500 people with learning disabilities that we were supporting 24/7. And to have given that up and to have said, hey, another organization can do that, I don't think is right. But what it created, and you describe it really articulately, Jack, is this constant tension. It's almost, it's not a tug of war, because that sounds like it's aggressive or competitive, and it isn't about that. But leadership in organizations like the CSP require us to continually rebalance. So I'm coming back to my continual customer focus. We need to understand how that's experienced by our members. We need to understand what it is that could be better whilst retaining the benefit that we have as an organization that does both things. And I think we see this in pay deals, etc. But there is a difference at the CSP, and there is a difference in our membership, and I'll illustrate that through one example, and that is our members who are working in private practice, like yourself, either as business owners or as private physiotherapists, whichever, have very different needs potentially to those who are working in the NHS. And when you look at our product for that, what we get quite often is a tension where our private members, or those working in private practice, say to us, well, we really like the PLI, but we don't want the union because that's not important to us because we're working for ourselves, and we're not going to take a claim against ourselves. Whereas our public sector colleagues say, well, we don't want the PLI, but we really want the union. And what you could potentially envisage, were we to try to please all of the people all of the time, is that you differentiate the offer, and in so doing jettison some of the real benefits that the organization has of being both. So
I think, and one of the things on a thought experiment, sorry to interrupt.
No, please do. Yeah,
we've got a slight lag because I didn't mean to there, but I wonder, on a thought experiment level, because imagine that the market economics didn't mean that then the buying power really mattered, because I think that definitely then sways the argument. It's one of the reasons my insight into the organization has actually then softened my stance so I think you found me 5-6 years ago being very publicly pro-split, like this is a tug of war and they're aiming in different directions and stuff, and I've matured that position. But thought experiment means that then that economy of scale doesn't necessarily improve the buying power, etc. I can so understand that you could argue that those departments or parts of the offering could stand alone. If they're good enough, they would stand alone in any market, right? Why would you, if they were well articulated as an offering, then they would be of strength enough that why wouldn't you want a specialized trade union? Yeah, of course you might be able to find yourself something cheaper over on Unison, but why would you not want someone that understands the exact scope of your practice at a moment's notice? Our PLI is absolutely fantastic. Of course, it's best in class. Again, because I'm arguing in this thought experiment that we wouldn't need the economy of scale. And similarly, look at us driving standards in competence and beyond over here. Why would you not want to be involved in what is essentially not just a Royal College, but it's a chartered society of which we can set thresholds for that to be something that really matters as a benchmark in society? So I suppose I'm just worrying that sometimes that homogeneity that comes from it being one membership, whilst it has its upsides, how do we make sure we mitigate that not being a complacency, that one can over support the other in a sense, because they're never actually having to stand up to the market as they're on their own feet?
So great question, and I'd answer it this way. Good leadership is not complacent, but it is humble. And good leadership and good organizations recognize first and foremost that there's probably nothing we do that's perfectly ideal. Okay? That we'll also recognize there are numerous options that we should look at to see if there's a different way of doing things. And so please be totally aware that I would never, you'll never hear me say, because that's how we do it. You certainly won't hear me say, that's how we've always done it. I will constantly ask that question because that's humility. It's recognizing that the CSP is not a perfect entity. It doesn't get everything right all of the time. It doesn't satisfy all of our members every day when they wake up. It just simply doesn't. Frontline will, some people absolutely love the content of Frontline. Some others think it needs to change. My job and the job of the CSP is constantly seeking what our customer is looking for. But I will say this to you, which is really important in the learning disability world. One of the real frustrations of politicians and policymakers was, if we need to know something about learning disabilities, where do we go? Okay, they might have come to MenCap, they might have gone to Learning Disability England, they might have gone to Dimensions, they might have gone, and their constant frustration with us was, can you just give us somewhere that we can go? And of course, because don't ever underestimate the competitive nature of the charitable sector, okay? I think lots of people think it's really, and it is, it's very societally driven and very societally focused, good, but it's business at the end of the day. And so there was always this tension. I think it's very clear to me that if you are working on clinical standards in policy making, for example, and you need to talk to physiotherapy, or you need to talk about physiotherapy, where will you go? The Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. If you are working on employment laws, employment rights, pay deals, whatever, and you want to involve physiotherapy, the profession, where do you go? Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. And if you want to work on commercial deals, such as PLI, such as conferencing, such as all of those things that happen in this business, and physiotherapy is something that you need to be engaged with, where do you go? Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. There is huge benefit to that, Jack. We are absolutely seen as central to this profession on all of the different aspects of our operation.
And I think that's one of the things that I've found myself increasingly concluding, even at the high points of my criticisms, including publicly of the organisation. One of the reasons why I've lent in and why I sit on council is because it's an important organisation for all the reasons you've mentioned, and that people very rarely have whilst it can look like complete apathy, they also retain their membership in part because it's too important for us to give it up. The opportunity for it to be better and for it to be different in lots of ways is so plentiful because of all the diversity of its roles and responsibilities.
Exactly.
And how it is homogenous in the ways that, of course, we can look at and criticize, but that's how it is. And there are real obvious upsides that we could better exploit. And so, yeah, really appreciate that. Now, I'm conscious, did I stop us at 6 and there is a 7th, or did
there
we get
is
there?
1 7th, and this is it's to illustrate that whilst my role is predominantly for the membership, you know, that I'm here to lead a membership organization and to respond. We also need to be a very good organization, and any organization is going to deliver the best results through its people. And so the 7th is for me and others in the organization, and indeed outside. We will deliver by the end of this calendar year a people strategy for the CSP. And why? You know, Karen was very clear that this was part of our overall strategy. But when I came in, I asked the questions about, well, why would we have one of those? Because you don't have to have a people strategy. There's nobody outside saying to me, you're not allowed to exist as an organization unless you've got a people strategy. Yes, we can. However, I am absolutely committed to the fact that if we can ensure that the team of people, the 160 people at the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy can come to work every day and do their very best work for our members, then that will make us a better organization. And so by the end of this year, we will deliver a people strategy in consultation and in collaboration with the people working at the CSP. And that will have impact on how we work with council, with networks, with members directly. It will have an influence on how we turn up and how people experience us. And that's the final one of the 7.
Superb. Well, thank you so much as ever for your time, John. It's always great to chat to you. And one of the things I was really keen to do on this episode is to show people the engage back and forth and grappling with the issues of which I know you enjoy personally and are very willing to do publicly. And so that's one of the things that's been great, is that I've never had a sense from you, certainly in the build up to this, but at any time that there was anything I needed to leave on the table or it needed to be said around when the mics weren't hot. And so I know that that's something that our listeners will be very appreciative of, and something that they're looking forward to, for us to understand how the organization can feel like it really does truly represent them. And there are channels and also ears that will be keen to hear what they have to say. And so I really do appreciate you coming on. What are you looking forward to in the immediate term? What's coming up for you?
So some great conversations, and it's in the space that you're in, Jack. I think it's I'm really looking forward to the EDB discussions. I think it's a prime opportunity for us to really take stock of where we are. I have a natural propensity towards organizational intelligence and sharing transparent information. And I think the more that we can do that for our members and the council will be great. And I am rather fascinated and really excited to really develop the relationships with the professional networks. And you know, only this week I've had very good conversations with the MSK PN. I also had a meeting with Physio First today. And that private non-NHS space is really intriguing, I think. And I think it's going to undergo, you know, let's not preempt the outcome of this election in any way, shape, or form, but let's recognize that one of the parties vying for that leadership has only yesterday released part of their manifesto to say that they will put 40,000 additional appointments a week into the system. Well, to think that that won't happen, at least in part, through our private practitioners and our non-NHS workforce, as well as our NHS workforce, would be naive. And what I'm really excited about is understanding where the juxtaposition of those two parts of our profession will come and how we can, you know, what I said to the stakeholders this week, it's not my role as CEO to determine how we do that, but it is my role as CEO to convene those stakeholders so that we can have a really good broad conversation about factors that really influence us in our profession.
And then that is the opportunity we can really take advantage of our being so macro,
Exactly.
right? It's only in that instance, only the stronger together. Otherwise, it does feel like it's like the classic thing of two of the most famous analogies that exist completely contrast. Too many cooks can spoil the broth, or many hands make light work. Right? It's like, because we both know that they are infinitely true in the context or with the right personnel. It can be one way or the other. It can be either of those things can still happen. Whereas if we can truly have that macro approach, let's have many hands make light work rather than too many cooks spoiling the broth, because we're collaborating efficiently and effectively. And I do think that the CSP has such an important role in that, because it has such a significant percentage capture of the UK's registered physiotherapists. And that is one of the things that makes it so unique, and why, back to the start, my first tongue-in-cheek question to you, who'd want that job? I know that you are certainly a man for it, and I was in a unique position to contribute to your appointment. I'm excited for the future of both the organisation and the profession under your tenure, and consider Physio Matters an ever-critical friend, and certainly me personally, I look forward to working with you on many of these things for many years to come.
And thank you. And you'll know this from my interview, Jack, when I used the analogy of hydrotherapy and when you asked me about, or when I brought in the concept of turbulence. So you've mentioned two analogies there. You'd be mad to think I'm not going to throw in a third one. So I agree with you entirely. Many hands make light work, too many cooks boil the broth, but there is a third one, and that's two heads are better than one. And I think that that's a really important one for us to remember, and specifically for me to remember in my position, is that, yeah, my head might be full of experience and full of ability in leadership, but it's only one head, and it's not the head. That's not the one head that is going to change this. It's a combination of all of our heads and all of our thinking and all of our experiences that will bring us forward. And that's what I want to be able to do as a CEO.
I do like that. No, that's brilliant. And for those that have been paying close attention and know what the weird intersection between all of my various projects are, this will be the last podcast from Choose Health HQ. This is the last room to be dismantled as we move on Monday. So I record this on the Thursday. We're moving on Monday. I'm sorry I'm a bit disheveled. I saw my last patients on Tuesday here and thought, well, I'm not seeing any patients. I can let myself go a little bit. So I've got my overalls on. I stripped my top half off just for this podcast. And I'm sorry I'm a bit unshaven, but I'm sure you'll forgive me that. We move and we will update you all on what's going on there. Very high-tech practice that we're building up the road. And I look forward to showing you around that. So thank you all for listening. Really appreciate your time as ever, John. Look forward to catching up with you soon. And take care, all of you.
Thanks so much, Jack.
Are you tired of stick people drawings stinking up your exercise programs? Do you wish you had an exercise prescription software that had hundreds of pictures, videos, fully customizable text, inbuilt virtual consultation software, and you could send it by email or WhatsApp? If that software existed, I bet you would want a 3-month free trial, wouldn't you? Just go to rehabmypatient.com/physiomatters now.